When you hear the word epicure, what pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably someone who loves fine dining, luxury, a life of total indulgence. And that, right there, is one of the biggest ironies in the history of philosophy. Because the man himself, Epicurus, would have been absolutely horrified by that image. So let's get into it and uncover the real story behind one of philosophy's most misunderstood thinkers.
Okay, so this is the central puzzle we're looking at. The stereotype is all about extravagance, but the reality? Epicurus' idea of a feast was simple barley cakes and water. And if he was really splurging, maybe, just maybe, he'd ask for a small pot of cheese. So how on earth did a philosopher of radical simplicity become the poster boy for luxury? That's the question.
To really get him, you have to picture his world. Epicurus lived way back from 341 to 270 BCE, during what's called the Hellenistic period. Alexander the Great's massive empire had just crumbled, old traditions were falling apart, and people, for the first time, felt this deep, personal anxiety. They were cut off from the old certainties of the city-state, so his philosophy wasn't just some abstract exercise, it was a very real, practical guide for how to live a good life in a world that felt like it was spinning out of control.
So around 306 BCE, he started a school in Athens. He called it the Garden. And let me tell you, the Garden wasn't just revolutionary, it was scandalous for its time. In a society with super rigid social rules, he opened his doors to everyone. Women, slaves, foreigners didn't matter. If you were looking for a calmer mind, you were welcome. It was literally a retreat from the noise and chaos of public life, a community built around one goal: finding peace.
You see, Epicurus looked at philosophy as a kind of medicine for the soul, and he made a diagnosis. He said that most of our misery, our constant anxiety, really boils down to two things: irrational fears that we can't let go of, and crazy desires that we can never, ever satisfy. His whole system was basically designed to treat these two problems.
So what were these fears? He zeroed in on the two big ones that he believed poison human life more than anything else. First, the fear of being punished by angry gods, and second, the absolute terror of what happens after we die. He figured if you could just get rid of these two fears, you'd be well on your way to a peaceful life.
His logic for the first one was pretty brilliant. Epicurus wasn't an atheist. He didn't deny the gods existed. He just reimagined them. His argument went like this: if the gods are perfect beings, then they must be totally blissful. And a perfect, blissful being has no needs, right? No anger, no jealousy. So why would they possibly waste their time getting involved in our messy human lives? For him, the gods were just ideals of tranquility to look up to, not terrifying tyrants to be afraid of.
Now, his argument against the fear of death was just as bold, and it was all based on physics. He was an atomist, meaning he believed that everything in the universe, including our souls, is made of tiny physical particles called atoms. So when your body dies, the atoms that make up your soul simply break apart and scatter. There's no consciousness left, no you to experience anything at all.
And this famous quote is his logical knockout punch. It's so simple but so profound. You can't experience being dead, because the very second the death shows up, you, the one who would experience it, are already gone. By taking away the possibility of a conscious afterlife, he hoped to take away all the anxiety that ruins our actual present lives.
And he applied that same clear-headed thinking to our desires. He broke them down into three simple categories, as you can see here. First, you've got natural and necessary desires, things like basic food, a safe place to sleep, and friendship. These, he said, are easy to get and bring real, lasting pleasure. Then there's natural but unnecessary, things like gourmet meals or expensive wine. They're fine every now and then, but chasing them leads to anxiety. And finally, the most dangerous category, vain and empty desires. This is the stuff like fame, power, and massive wealth. These desires have no natural limit, and he said they are a guaranteed recipe for a miserable life.
So, if our fears and our out-of-control desires are the disease, then what's the cure? Well, Epicurus gave a very clear prescription, and it all starts with completely rethinking what pleasure even means, and then following a practical set of rules to get it.
The ultimate goal for Epicurus wasn't excitement or a sensory rush. No, the highest form of pleasure was something he called ataraxia. It's a Greek word that means a state of deep, serene calmness. It's freedom from mental disturbance. True pleasure isn't about adding thrills. It's about subtracting distress. It's a stable, peaceful state of well-being.
And here it is, his famous prescription, the tetrapharmakos, which just means the four-part cure. It was designed to be memorized, like a mantra you could repeat to yourself anytime you felt anxious. We've already covered the first two. Don't fear the gods, and don't worry about death. Number 3. What is good is easy to get.
is all about realizing that our basic needs are simple to meet. And number 4, what is terrible is easy to endure, is his way of saying that intense pain doesn't last long, and if pain is chronic, it's usually manageable enough that we can still find peace.
Now, this whole philosophy wasn't just theory. The garden was the lab where it was all put into practice every single day. And the most important ingredient in this experiment wasn't quiet meditation, it was community.
This brings up a huge question, right? If we live in a universe that's just random atoms, and the gods couldn't care less about us, where do we find any security? What could possibly give us the stability we need to be happy?
And his answer is incredibly modern and maybe a little surprising. It's friendship. For Epicurus, friendship was the highest possible good. Not duty to the state, not romantic love, not even family obligations, but the chosen family you build with trusted friends.
So why friendship? Because in a fundamentally uncertain world, a close circle of friends is the only real support system you have. It's a refuge. Friends give you the emotional and practical backup you need to achieve ataraxia. They're the foundation that lets you build a peaceful mind. So, okay, that's all fascinating for ancient Greece, but how does a 2,300-year-old philosophy really apply to us today? Well, you might be surprised. Epicurus's ideas are probably more relevant right now than they've ever been. Just think about it. His philosophy is a direct antidote to so many of our modern problems. That feeling of being on a hedonic treadmill, where you're always chasing the next new thing but never getting happier. The constant status seeking that's fueled by social media, the anxiety and isolation that comes from our digital lives. Epicureanism directly challenges that modern voice in our head that screams that happiness is always found in more.
And that really brings us to the core lesson here. For Epicurus, the path to happiness isn't about adding more stuff, more followers, more experiences, more possessions. No, true, lasting pleasure is found by subtracting the things that cause us pain and anxiety, our fears, our dependencies, and our empty desires.
So in the end, the real Epicurus throws down a challenge to our entire culture. He asks us to think about a pretty radical idea. In a world that is completely obsessed with getting more, could the real secret to a happy life actually be less?